My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
My name is Cleo Wright, and this is Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. This morning, we're gonna do a story about one of Uncle Remus' story. And I tell stories from around the world and then some personal stories sometimes. But I think this story hit my eye when I turned to it. It's called, let me get my glasses. Being fashionable ain't always healthy. Being fashionable ain't always healthy. I'm getting this from Uncle Remus, The Complete Tales, told by Lester, Julius Lester, and illustrated by Jerry Pinkney. I had a discussion with Julius Lester one time, and that was exciting to me. Okay, being fashionable ain't always healthy. One September, an awful storm hit the part of the country where the animals lived. The animals were afraid they were going to be blown to the other side of the world if they stayed on the top side. They managed to come through the storm all right, but an animal that lived was far away didn't make out too good. That was old Cranny Crow. Folks call him Huron now. But back in them times, he had a name what somebody could say, and it sounded like English. The storm was even worse down in Cranny Crow's country. That wind got a hold of Cranny Crow and turned him around and around in the air. When it set him down, he was up in the animal part of the world. Cranny Crow didn't know where he was. He wasn't even too sure that he was. He'd been whirled around so much that he leaned against a tree like a drunk man for an hour or so before he thought about even trying to walk. When he was feeling more like himself, he looked around to see where he was. He couldn't see a thing because it was in the middle of the night. All he knew was that he was a long way from home. There was water halfway up his legs, and that felt familiar because Cranny Crow had always lived where he could wade in the water. What Cranny Crow didn't know was that the wind had set him down in the long crane swamp. After a while, the sun started to rise and shine his lamp into the swamp, and Cranny Crow could see. But seeing didn't tell him any more than not seeing had. The swamp knew somebody was in it who didn't belong there, and it was disturbed, but the sun was coming up. So the swamp went to sleep, 'cause that's when it slept. The swamp had the worst sleep that day it had ever had, before or since. It had nothing but bad dreams and daymares. After a while, the sun stood right above the swamp. Even its new even it knew something was wrong. It wanted to see in and shone as much of his light into the dark swamp as he could, but couldn't see nothing. Bright as the lamp of the sun is, it couldn't light up the swamp. So it went on its way to the other side of the world. While the sun was arching over the swamp, trying to find out what the trouble was, Craney Crow was wading around in the water, looking for a frog or a fish to take the edge off his appetite. But there wasn't a frog or fish to be seen. The swamp had gone to sleep. Old Craney Crow walked around, his eyes as wide open as a fresh dug grave. He'd never seen anything like the swamp in his life. He was used to grass and water. There was nothing here but vines and reeds and trees with moss on them that made him look like Grandsir Graybeard. The vines and creepers looked like they were reaching out for him. He walked around like the ground was hot. He didn't know how in the world he was going to make his home in such a strange place. Toward evening, Craney Crow walked out of the water onto the muddy bank. The swamp yawned and stretched itself. Brer Mud Turtle opened his eyes and sneezed so hard that he rolled off the bank into the water. Achoo! Splash! Craney Crow jumped back and almost stepped on Brer Billy's black snake. That scared him so much that he jumped back again and near about landed on a frog, which is what he'd been looking for all day. Craney Crow was so scared by all the creatures coming to life that he didn't even think about eating the frog. Jack-o'-lanterns were flying around, their lights blinking on and off like they were looking for him. The frog hollered at him, "What you doing here? What you doing here?" The coon ran by and laughed at him. Mr. Billy Gray Fox peeked out of a clump of bushes and barked at him. Mr. Mink peeped his green eyes at him, and the whippoorwill scolded him. After a while, all the creatures left him alone and went about their business. Old Craney Crow started moving around again. He noticed that the birds that flew around in the daytime were going to bed without their heads. He looked into a lot of bushes, and sure enough, all the day birds had all gone to sleep without their heads. Craney Crow had never seen such a thing. That must be the custom of the day birds in this part of the country. Craney Bird wanted so much to be a part of this new community. The wind had placed him down in. But how could he if he went to sleep with his head on? Of course, if Craney Crow had looked real close, or if his eyes had been more accustomed to the night, he could have seen that the birds had simply tucked their heads under their wings. But Craney Crow didn't see that. It was long past Craney Crow's bedtime. He looked around and saw Brer Popeye staring at him. That was what Brer Rabbit called himself when he went down to the low country. "How do, Mr. Craney Crow?" said Brer Popeye. "How do, Brer Popeye? You might be just the man I'm looking for. would you be good enough to tell me something? If I know it, I'll tell it to you. I'd sure appreciate it. What I want to know is this. How do all the flying birds take their heads off when they go to bed? I just can't figure out how they do it. Well, I think Brer Popeye is going to about tell him how to do it. And we'll be right back with this story in just a moment. Being fashionable ain't always healthy. We'll be back in a moment.
Hello, I'm J. Stan McCauley, and I'm exploring a run for mayor of the city of Hartford in the 2019 election. It's undeniable that Hartford has many challenges. However, I believe that our residents are our strength. The question is, do you believe, like I do, in the potential of Hartford? You see the many assets the city has, but do you wonder, as I do, why we are still struggling to move ahead? Do you wonder why the solutions being offered to us just don't seem to get the job done? Well, creating a vibrant city begins with you. We have incredible people who live in the city, who have great solutions to Hartford's biggest challenges. But you don't always have a platform to have your ideas heard, let alone given an opportunity to co-create solutions that work for you, that work for us, that work for Hartford. Hartford's journey will be bumpy, and we'll continue to face highs and lows that challenge us to work smarter and come together as a community that is willing to capitalize on the power of our collective diversity of thought. The challenges facing Hartford will require each of us to act, whether in small ways or big ones. If you're with us on this journey, give me a call at 860-944-9797 and host a listening event for me. Invite a few of your friends so we can explore the possibilities together for a better Hartford.
What's going on? Oh, baby. What's really going on?
Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. When I left you, Craney Crow wanted to be part of the community, and he was thrown into the animal world on the bottom. He was thrown into that by a storm, and he's in this strange place, and he's looking to belong. He wants to belong. Since he got to live there, he wants to belong. And he sees the birds, and the birds are sleeping, and they're sleeping without their heads, according to him. But he doesn't see that their heads are just tucked under their wings. He thinks they have no heads at night. So he's wondering how he could be a part of this community. What is he to do? And he meets Brer Popeye, who is Brer Rabbit in the underworld. So let's see what happens when Craney Crow asks Brer Popeye what's going on. And I just can't figure out how they do it. I ain't surprised, Mr. Craney Crow. You a stranger in these parts. The mosquitoes in this swamp are so awful that the only way the birds can get some sleep is to take their heads off and put them someplace where the mosquitoes can't find them. But how in the world do they do it? Brer Popeye. Brer Popeye laughed. Ha, ha, ha. Well, they don't do it by themselves. No, indeed. They hire someone to do it for them. Where can I find him? I sure would like to get some sleep. You stay right here. He'll be around soon. He's probably checking to make sure he ain't missed nobody. Mr. Craney Crow thought for a moment. Tell me this, how do they get their heads back on? Brer Popeye shook his head. Can't tell you. I'm a night person myself. About the time they be getting their heads back on is about the time I go to sleep. But if you want me to, I'll hunt up the man in charge of taking their heads off. Old Craney Crow thanked him. Brer Popeye took off and came back in a little while with Brer Wolf. Brer Wolf's tongue was hanging out of his mouth and dripping so much wet it made a puddle at his feet. This is Doc Wolf. Doc, this is Mr. Craney Crow. Craney Crow told Doc Wolf how much he wanted to go to sleep like the other birds, so maybe they'd be friends with him in the morning. Doc Wolf put his finger in his vest hole and looked like a sure-enough doctor. I don't know as I can help you, Mr. Craney Crow. To tell you the truth, I ain't never seen a creature with such a long neck as yours. He felt Craney Crow's neck tenderly, running his hands up and down it. Hold your head lower, Mr. Craney Crow. Mr. Craney Crow did, and snap! That was the last of Mr. Craney Crow. Brer Wolf slung him over his back and trotted on home, but that was after him and Brer Rabbit gave each other high five. Yes, sir, we done did this. Brer Rabbit decided it was time for him to get on home, too. He took longer than it should have because he couldn't walk for laughing. About Mr. Craney Crow, he'd walk a little ways, then have to sit down beside the road 'cause he was laughing so hard. Finally, he made it as far as Brer Fox's house. Brer Fox was working in his pea patch when he heard somebody laughing. He looked over the fence to see who it was, and there was Brer Rabbit rolling around in the grass, holding his sides and laughing. Hey, Brer Rabbit, what's the matter with you? Brer Rabbit was laughing so hard he couldn't do nothing but shake his head. Miss Fox stuck her head out the window. Sandy, what all that racket? Don't you know that the baby just went to sleep? It ain't nobody but Brer Rabbit, and it looked to me like he got the hysterics. Well, I don't care what he got. He better take his racket away from here before he wakes the baby and scares the life out of them what ain't sleep. Brer Rabbit caught his breath and walked up to the house to pass the time of day with Brer Fox and his wife. I apologize for all my carrying on, he told him, but I can't help it. Maybe it ain't right to laugh at them who ain't got the sense they ought to have been born with. But I can't help myself. To tell the truth, I should have been home hours ago. I would have been if not for something I saw last night. He started laughing again. What'd you see, Brer Rabbit? Miss Fox wanted to know. It sure sounds like it was funny, and I ain't never turned a good laugh away from this door. So Brer Rabbit told him all about old Cranny Crow coming into the swamp and not knowing how to go to bed. And the funny thing was that Cranny Crow didn't know that when you go to bed, you're supposed to take your hat off. Brer Rabbit started laughing again, just laughing. Miss Fox looked at Brer Fox. He looked at her, and they didn't know what to say or how to say it. Brer Rabbit saw how they was looking at each other, but didn't let on. Cranny Crow looked like a man who's been around and knows what the fashion is. But when he got to the swamp and saw all the creatures sleeping with their heads off, he looked like somebody who just came out of the country and seen neon lights for the first time. He stood there with his mouth open like he ain't got no more sense than a crocker sack. Brer Rabbit laughed again. Well, I've been trying to get home all this time to tell my wife about how Cranny Crow looked when he seen what the new fashion is. Brer Rabbit commenced to laughing again. Brer Fox and Miss Fox laughed too. They didn't want Brer Rabbit to think that they were as dumb as Cranny Crow. Where Cranny Crow come from that he don't know the fashion? Miss Fox asked. Brer Rabbit shook his head. He must be from so far back in the country that the sun don't shine there yet. Brer Fox said that he didn't much care about fashion, to tell the truth. Brer Rabbit agreed. I like the old ways myself, but when something new comes along that makes sense, I ain't gonna turn my back on it just because it's new. No, sir. Before I got in the habit of sleeping with my head off, I wouldn't have believed that it could be so comfortable. The first time I tried it, well, I don't mind telling you, I was a little nervous, but I got used to it pretty quick. And now, if it was to go out of fashion, I'd keep right on with it and wouldn't care what anybody said. Well, Brer Rabbit looked up at the sun, which was steadily climbing the arch of heaven, make his farewell, and went on his way. Well, Brer Rabbit's on his way home. And I don't think Brer Fox even understood what he was talking about. But we'll get back to that story in just a moment. I'll be right back. The folks at Cull Books in Hartford want to remind parents, kids need to exercise the most important muscle in their body, the brain. How do you do that? Read. What happens? Well, let me tell you. The imagination soars, the creativity blossoms, the world opens up, and the need to be entertained by outside forces diminishes. Don't believe me? Try it. You won't be sorry, and in time, either will your kids. Cull Book cares about your child's literacy. Join Miss Cleo every week on Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner online at accesstv.org. Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner, and we're telling the story of being fashionable ain't always healthy. And Craney Crow wanted to go to sleep, and he thought the birds were going to help him go to sleep, or Brer Wolf would help him go to sleep, but he thought you needed to cut your head off. And so he met Brer Popeye, who got Brer Wolf, and he cut Craney Crow's head off, and they carted him away. And Brer Rabbit just thought that was the funniest thing, and so he explained all of that to Brer Fox and his wife. He said, I had to get used to sleeping with my head off, but I'm getting kind of used to it now because that's in the fashion. And he's telling them about the fashion. And they said, I don't care anything about the fashion, says Brer Fox. But what say Miss Fox? What's she thinking? Let's get back to that. Well, that's something, ain't it? Brer Fox said to his wife, sleeping with your head off. I ain't never heard of such a thing. Miss Fox grunted. The world ain't big enough to hold all the things you ain't heard of. Here I am, scrambling and working my eyeballs out to be as good as the neighbors, and you don't give a hoot if your family is in fashion or not. Sleeping with your head off is a fashion. I ain't got much interest in trying. No, and you ain't got no interest in what folks say about me and the children neither. No wonder Brer Rabbit was laughing so hard. You ought to seen the way your mouth was hanging open when he was telling us about it. I bet he's sitting up right now telling his wife about how tacky the Fox family is. Miss Fox went back in the house. After a while, Brer Fox came in to eat breakfast, but the stove looked as cold as snowballs in February. Ain't you fixing my breakfast this morning? Fixing and eating breakfast is one of the fashions. If you ain't gonna follow the fashion, I don't see how come I should. Brer Fox went out back of the house and sat down to do some thinking and scratching his fleas. That night, when it was time to go to bed, Brer Fox came in. I reckon I'm ready to get my head taken off so I can sleep. Miss Fox was so happy. I knowed you loved me, she said. Brer Fox grinned, but I don't know nothing about how to do it. I reckon you're gonna have to help me. Miss Fox didn't know no more than Brer Fox did, so they sat on the edge of the bed and talked about it for a while. You should twist my head off. Ticklish as you is, that ain't gonna work. What about the axe? That give me the heebie-jeebies. They sat in silence for a long while until Miss Fox said, the axe scares me, but on the other hand, we know that if something is the fashion, it ain't gonna hurt. She went to the woodshed and came back with the axe. You ready, honey? Ready as I'll ever be. Brer Fox responded. Whack! Off came his head at the neck. Brer Fox squirmed and twitched and kicked. Miss Fox smiled and said, that's a sign he's dreaming. After a while, Brer Fox was still. He looked like he having the best sleep he'd ever had. Miss Fox got ready to go to bed and then realized that she still had her hat on. She went over and shook Brer Fox, trying to wake him up so he could help get her hat off. She shook him. She hollered at him, but he didn't stir. So she had to go to bed with her hat on. She couldn't sleep for worrying about what the neighbors would think if they knew she was lying in bed with her hat on. When she finally got to sleep, she had awful dreams. In one of them, Brer Rabbit was laughing at her, and when she made a grab for him, dogs started chasing her. She was glad when morning came. She went to wake up Brer Fox, but he just lay there. She shook him and yelled at him and pushed him and pulled him, but he just lay there. She started hollering so loud that Brer Rabbit, who was going by on the road, thought she was calling him. He went to the door to see what she wanted. "Brer Rabbit," she exclaimed, "I'm so glad to see you. I've been trying to wake up Brer Fox, and he's lazier this morning than I've ever seen him. And that's saying a lot." "He'll get up in good time," Brer Rabbit assured her. "I don't know what you call good time," she insisted. "The sun already up, way up in the sky, and he's still asleep. If I'd known that taking your head off would make you sleep like that, I might not have done it." "What did you say?" Brer Rabbit asked. "Brer Fox had me take off his head before he went to sleep last night." "What did you take it off with?" "The axe." Brer Rabbit covered his mouth with his hands and walked away. It looked like he was crying, but he wasn't. When he got down the road a piece, he started laughing. He laughed so hard he fell over in a ditch. Laughed, he said, like he'd said, some folks didn't have the sense they should have been born with. Sure enough. Whoa! Well, is that so different than some of the things we do? Huh? To be fashionable. Well, we see one of those commercials that says, if you do this, it'll take the lines away. It'll do this and take this away. I wish it would do all these things. Of course, you may get this. It may it may put you on dialysis. It may do this. It may do that. And it may, and cause death. It says on the TV today. All these things it may do to you. But you want this wrinkle to go away. You want this to happen or that to happen. And they say, go to your doctor and tell him you want this. Well, you go to your doctor, thousands and thousands of people do it. And then a couple of years down the line, what do you hear on the TV? If you've taken this medication and you're going to dialysis or your toes have fell off, call the law offices of boom, 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 and the boom. And if one of your relatives died, you can get some money. Of course, if you're still alive, give us a call. And we'll get you some. We'll get you some money. They're gonna really soon. Of course, you don't have any toes. You probably can't walk in your dialysis. But hey, I guess the money gonna do you some good. A couple of years down the line. Well, that's our story for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you thinking a little bit about some of the things that we go through in everyday life and how when people get the best of us, whether it be corporations, politicians, our next door neighbor, friends, whatever, and laugh and laugh and laugh at us, and we think that we got something because we haven't figured it out, we haven't studied it, we haven't done anything to find out whether it was true or not. Now, don't you think that Craney Crow could have just went up and tapped one of those birds and asked the bird, tapped them to see what would happen, or stayed around until they woke up to see where their heads were? I mean, he could have done a lot of things. He just wanted to be part of the community, and he would have done anything to be part of that group, and it got him dead. Think about some of the things we do every single day. Well, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the story. And you remember, read a little, write a little, dream big. And I'll see you next week.